Okay, welcome everyone. I'm just going to get started here. People are starting to stream in to the webinar this morning, so let's get started. We'll do some introductions and then get right into the presentation. Good day to everybody and welcome to Ravensflow's Best Practice webinar series. My name is Dave Ruiz. I'm the Vice President of Products for Ravenflow, and I'll be your host and demo guide for today's webinar titled Simplifying Process Mapping with Raven Cloud and Visio. Today you'll learn how Raven Cloud is transforming, or certainly working to transform, the business process market by automatically generating process diagrams from natural language text. This will be highlighted by a live demo that shows you how you can take these diagrams right into Microsoft Visio, where they look and feel and behave just like any Visio diagram that you might have drawn by yourself. Of course, the key with Raven Cloud is that you don't have to draw them. Before we begin, I want to cover just a few housekeeping items. First, you should go ahead and submit questions directly through this GoToWebinar interface, as there should be time. I intend to complete this webinar on time to answer any questions you might have. You can also post questions at the Raven Cloud blog by going to blog@ravenflow.com. And then we'll be recording the webinar as well, so that if you want to share it with colleagues, we'll be sending out a link the day after, I think, the event is complete. And I'll be giving my email address at the end of the presentation, so if any of you out there would like to get a copy of today's presentation, just drop me an email message and I'll be happy to send it along. So let's go ahead and get started. We have a good attendee list here today, so let me just close this console and we'll begin. Okay, so in terms of today's agenda, focus of course is this combination of Raven Cloud and Visio that we'll really focus on today, but we want to give you a little bit of background information on the value of process modeling, of a process-driven approach to looking at your business, a way of driving requirements for transforming your business, etc. So just a bit about that. Some of the challenges that you as business analysts or others that work in the application development lifecycle might face in dealing with business process. Introduce you to Raven Cloud and really focus on its ability to help business analysts and process analysts and others really get to the point where they can express the description of a process and generate a diagram automatically from that description. And of course, we'll demonstrate that in full in today's webinar. I want to walk you through some of the planned enhancements to the Raven Cloud and the entire Raven product line and give you a chance to weigh in on what you think about that. And finally, we'll wrap up with whatever time remaining we have in terms of questions about Raven Cloud. So why modeling? Why model your business processes? It's all about really providing a basis for understanding, a shared understanding about the way the business works now and how you can make it work better. And principally, you want to make sure you have a basis for achieving understanding between business stakeholders on one side, right, whose business it is to run, and IT stakeholders who typically are tasked for performing a development work scope in order to transform the way the company works through some automated application, some back-end system that needs to be enhanced to engage customers and partners, whatever it happens to be. So business process helps you provide that basis. It also provides a visual way of clarifying the functional scope of a given project, which provides a basis for managing expectations on both sides. Right? So if business agrees that this is the way the business needs to change, and IT achieves that same understanding, then fundamentally the scope of the project is better understood than before. It also allows more people to be involved in the upfront elicitation of requirements, as well as validating the way the process is now, the so-called as-is process, as well as the proposed to-be process once the application project has been completed. Business process models also help you identify logical errors or missing steps in a flow so that you can catch those things before implementation begins. And it also describes how not only the different participants in the process interact with one another as people, but it also describes linkages, interactions between people and perhaps systems of record, or other organizations outside the enterprise. So again, I'm a big believer in business process and a process-driven approach to getting to requirements as a way of describing the way your business works. And because it's visual, it makes it easier to convey and to communicate between stakeholders, between business, IT, inside or outside. In terms of process modeling methods, of course, we know the tried and true method is, the tribal knowledge that comes from people who work in a company, describing the way things work with colleagues. The two people on the left in this particular slide kind of are talking about the way something works now, and the poor guy on the right, just on the outside looking in, doesn't really understand perhaps what's going on. We also all experience the conference room settings where whiteboards or flip charts are used to describe a business process, oftentimes accompanied with, enabled by sticky notes that are stuck on the wall. Of course, on that same whiteboard, those that dare can get up in front of everyone and scribe and lay out a business process as a series of boxes and arrows on a whiteboard. And then as you see along the bottom of this slide, oftentimes business users rely on Microsoft Office tools, Word to describe a process in writing, PowerPoint to create a simple flow chart because PowerPoint is the tool they're most comfortable using, or Microsoft Visio, which is certainly a market leader, if not the de facto standard for modeling business processes in the large enterprise market. But as we'll discuss here in a bit, some people are challenged in using Visio to get the type of outputs that they're looking for in terms of process models. A couple of surveys that have been conducted over the last couple years, more like 18 months, but one of which conducted by Forrester Research back in mid-2009, a global business analyst survey, where the question was asked, well, which of the following tools do you use to perform your job function as a business analyst or a BA? And if you look closely at the top two results, it's Word, it's Excel, it's Visio. Right? It's Office tools, and for flowcharting purposes, it's Visio. Right? In this particular survey, in the 90 percentile in terms of response. If you look down further on this chart, you see that business process management tools, right, BPM tools, are less than 10% of being used by the same business analyst audience. And as I call out on the side of this slide, you see that in our discussions with leading industry analysts like, excuse me, Gartner and Forrester, because I've asked the question to them straight up, saying, well, if that greater percentage of users are using Visio to draw process models, what percentage of them are very effective in doing so? And the responses range from the low of 5% to a high of 20%, but on average, 15% or less can use Visio effectively to create the types of process models that are needed to convey, this shared understanding between business and IT in the scheme of an application project or a software development lifecycle. And this other survey, also conducted by Forrester, a lean BPM online survey, where the question was asked about, well, what tools do you use to document process knowledge and facilitate requirements capture during process discovery? Process discovery is often a term used in the BPM market to describe that first phase of a project where you really want to gain an understanding of what processes are impacted by the project, i.e. the term discovery, and what are the requirements for transforming those processes from a as-is condition to a to-be condition. Right? So in this particular survey, it came back 60% of the respondents use Microsoft Office and Visio to perform that function. So, and in our own survey results in terms of performing webinars like this, we continue to ask the question. It always comes back 60%, 70% plus of users who are employing Visio are certainly trying to do that to get process models created, regardless of what the project scope is, whether it's process improvement, I just want to document my work procedures, or it's a true application life cycle where somebody's going to develop software in order to transform the process to something new and better, right? And so that's just an interesting set of results there. So very quickly, if I can ask Barry your indulgence here, I want to ask a poll question, which is how do you, or what tools do you use most often? Let me just do that now. So I've got this poll running. What tools do you use to model or diagram business process? And if in the next 10 or 15 seconds you could please respond, I use Visio, or I use a specific business process modeling tool from a third party. I use PowerPoint because that's the tool I know best. I use some other business diagramming tool like SmartDraw and iGraphics, or you know what, I don't model process diagrams at all, so I don't use any tool. All right, so looks like most of you are voting, so let me just close this poll out and share the results to you. And there you see it, right? So 78% of you are using Visio to create business process diagrams. So of course, that's the title of the webinar, so that's no big surprise. A solid 17% are using PowerPoint, which is about in the range that I typically see at 20-25%. And some of you are not doing any process modeling at all, and that's all fine too. So anyway, so thanks very much for that. Let me go back to the presentation then and talk a little bit about some of the process challenges that we see in dealing with process modeling in the enterprise space, regardless of what the project scope is. Despite advances in technology, right? Process modeling is still a discipline that's growing. There are some studies that I've seen that say it's becoming increasingly important that more stakeholders in the enterprise can contribute process knowledge and expertise, but they need help, right? And they struggle because they have a difficult time defining processes in a format that everyone can understand on the business side and IT sides of the aisle. They struggle to master the process modeling tools that they're being given, whether that happens to be Visio or something else. They struggle to ensure that the process models they create are functionally complete as well as logically correct in terms of how all the steps are connected together. They struggle to make sure that there's a basis for validating process understanding with these different stakeholders. And they also struggle, or they're challenged to create process artifacts that can be shared, reused, stored, classified, retrieved, referenced, etc., for not only this project but other projects going forward. And of course, the reasons that this is all important is because if you end up doing any of these things wrong, in particular, if you define the process incorrectly, it often is a primary source for flawed requirements, right, or missing requirements, as we often say, that become increasingly more expensive to fix the later it gets in the development life cycle, right? So one of our goals at Ravenflow has been to help people find these missing requirements, avoid this source of flawed requirements earlier in the life cycle as possible, so that you don't suffer from schedule slippages and you don't suffer from budget overruns, or at least certainly not to the degree that you do today. So those are some of those challenges. And then specifically, we've talked to a lot of business analysts or process analysts or requirements engineers that do process modeling, and these challenges are pretty universal, right? Many of people struggle to draw process diagrams from scratch because it's very tedious and time-consuming. Their learning curve for Visio and other drawing tools, in spite the advances that people have made, and Visio 2010 is very impressive, much easier to use, but still a challenge for a lot of people. Many business users just don't think visually. So if you recall that slide that I showed earlier about the whiteboard and the guy that dares to go up there and start mapping out the process, well, there are people that just aren't comfortable doing that. they struggle with the visual thinking part of it and laying out a process from scratch. They struggle with consistency to make sure that the way the diagram is not just laid out, but the way it's annotated is consistent from start to finish. And so making sure that the steps are named in a consistent way, perhaps in an active voice style, to make sure that the text that appears in each of the steps is consistent from one end to the other, so you don't call an activity something on one side of the diagram and something else on the other side, and when you're talking about the same business function. And then ultimately, modeling is a challenge because it happens to be error prone, right? That you have to make sure that it's logically correct, that the flows are proceeding in the right direction and in the right between the right set of steps, and just to make sure that the process is not only functionally complete but logically correct as it can possibly be. Which leads me to my second polling question, and I'll just do that really quick, which is, what are your most specific modeling challenges in terms of modeling business processes? So if you could please respond to these questions very quickly. It just takes too long to get the process diagrams I need drawn. Drawing tools are hard to use. Is anybody going to, people are, here we go, keep voting, here it comes. Laying out the process so the diagram looks right. This is a multiple choice question. Labeling all the process steps so everything's consistent, and ensuring the logic and flow are all correct, right? So as soon as I hit the 75% voting threshold, I'll close this poll. And just a couple more of you. There we go. Okay, so let me share those results to you. So 35% of you, it's pretty spread, pretty even here. It takes too long. It's just too hard. Laying everything out is complicated. Labeling is a challenge. Process logic is a challenge. So, again, these are pretty common themes that we've come across, and all of you are basically echoing some of those sentiments as we go through this. So that's great. Okay, so let me hide that one. Go back to the presentation. Oh, look, we have another poll here. So let me just quickly ask this question, which is, how long does it take you typically to create a business process map, right? Or a use case activity flow diagram, or a flow chart of some sort? So be honest here if you can. I know it's sometimes hard, but we really want to know. Is it, you can knock one out in a couple hours, and congratulations. If it's 3 to 4, 4 to 8, sometimes a day or more, this is a pretty common issue. And so that's one of the reasons that we're bringing something like Raven to market, which is to make put more people in position to create process models, create process maps without having to draw them. So one more second here. We'll close this poll and share the results. So 5% can knock it out in a couple hours. 45% is in the 3 to 4 hour range. 10% 4 to 8. 25 1 or day 2. So you see, right, that this is a non-trivial exercise. And obviously, the bigger the process, perhaps the longer it takes to get that done, and to make sure that it not only looks good, that it's laid out correctly, that the terminology is consistent through and through. These are some of the things, some of the challenges that we're trying to help people deal with. So let me hide that poll and go from there. Okay, so I have a quick question here, so I'm just going to, let me just okay, so one of the comments was, it doesn't take too long to make the diagram. It takes much more time to work with clients and understand the process. Yeah, and that's all a fair point, right? Because if you're in working with a client or working with an internal set of stakeholders, and early in a project life cycle, you're in the process discovery phase. What's the current process? Who are the actors who participate? What are the functions or capabilities they perform? What touch points they have with systems of record? So that's all a good comment, Catherine. Absolutely, that's in fact something that if you can provide tools and techniques that make that easier to do, so that you can accomplish that task sooner in the life cycle, that means you can confirm understanding with those people faster, which hopefully accelerates the end-to-end development. So good comment there. Okay, so enough of polling for a while. Let me just kind of dive into Raven Cloud, which really is fundamentally designed to help you achieve some of those objectives, which we launched Raven Cloud early back in the spring. Since that time, it's been averaging over 500 users per week, people coming in, trying it. It's a free open beta period. And at this point, we're planning to flip the switch on Raven Cloud and make it available as a subscription service. There'll also be a free account level as well, but a subscription service beginning next month. Right, so we're very excited about that here at Ravenflow. It's fundamentally about helping address this process challenge, right? To help more users, more business analysts, more process analysts contribute and define and visualize business processes in a form that is best suited for the type of process artifacts you need to create. Today's webinar is all about from Raven Cloud to Visio, but there are others that would use Raven Cloud to generate process models in some other format. And I'll talk about some of those when I get into the demonstration. Its focus is keep it simple, allow you to describe a process in writing. Hold on. I heard some extra sounds here. Okay, I just started to hear some noise through the console here, so I hope people can still hear me. And keeping it simple, allowing you to define a process, visualize it in an instant, identify any errors in that process, and then take it away in a diagram form, right? And as I said here at the bottom, the intent is to launch this as a subscription service beginning next month. So what its focus, of course, is to take, in this particular example, a description of a customer support process and go from that to the diagram that you see on the right, all through the power of the natural language engine that underpins everything that we do here at Ravenflow. And so rather than spend time talking about that in a slide, I'll just kind of get into the demonstration quickly. But one of the things I'll be pointing out in that demonstration is whether this is a business process or a portion of a business process that some people might refer to as a use case, a specific interaction between a user and a system, for example. We all take these things in as a narrative, a description in natural language text of that process, pass it into the Raven language engine, and then we have this very powerful visualization service that basically takes what the Raven engine produces and generates different diagrams from that. Today the focus is on Visio. There's also an ability to take away a process diagram in XPDL format, XML process description language, for those that are leveraging a BPM platform from any number of vendors, whether it's you name it, Pegasystems or Appian or Global 360, a number of vendors. XPDL is a common process interchange standard that you can actually get from Raven as well in the cloud. And BPMN is another diagram format, a business process modeling notation for those of you who care about that. That's something that we're working on. So there'll be a number of different process visualization capabilities we'll be offering in the coming months. We'll show you in this demonstration, specifically focus on Raven Cloud going to Microsoft Visio as shown in this slide. So let's just get into that demonstration now. Okay, so if you go to ravencloud.com, hold on, sorry, I'm starting to get a little throat problem here, but you go to ravencloud.com and you'll come to this page, and the call to action, of course, is give it a try. Right, and so when you do, you'll come to this rich internet application. Here I'm running it in Microsoft Internet Explorer, but it also works in Firefox, in the Google Chrome browser, as well as the Apple Safari browser. So basically it runs on any browser, pretty much on any platform. You can't yet run it on the iPhone or the iPad because Apple doesn't want you to run some of the Silverlight technology that we use to render these diagrams. But this is the application interface here that's meant to be pretty simple. On the left-hand side, you have what's called a Process Explorer, where we provide a set of process templates or examples just to help you get started. You can use this interface to tuck it out of the way as you see fit. And the process is pretty simple. You're either going to go in here and start authoring your own narrative, or you're going to use this search mechanism perhaps to go and find a particular process of interest. You can search and filter the list. And by just clicking on this little button here, it'll copy this sample narrative or this example into this area here, right? So this is what we describe as the process narrative pane. And it's here where you will actually author process or describe it in writing from start to finish. And so if this was the example that I wanted to highlight, I could just quickly copy it in, click on this Analyze button. Let me tuck this out of the way for you. And so what happened now is this diagram that you see on the right was created from this text that you see on the left. And the button in between provides a clear visual correlation that one leads to the other, right? So once you do an analysis using Raven, you can actually see, I can zoom in a little bit so you can see this a little bit better, that in fact a natural language analysis was done. I can click on this button here, which highlights the actors who participate in the process, the functions they perform, and the business objects that they send to one another, or they interchange, or the control that they transfer to one another as they do this. And notice how I can now colorize the text as shown here to make it clear what type of natural language analysis was performed by Raven to produce that diagram. And so another way of looking at this is to click on this button here, which shows automatically the terms that Raven identified when it did its analysis of the narrative. And so you can see here there's a customer actor that appears many times in the narrative, or the warehouse, which is the party that's going to deliver the particular product to the customer. There's a credit check here that appears, and so forth. And if I click on this show the functions here, I can actually click on these rows in the list, and actually it'll highlight the corresponding sentence in the narrative as well as the corresponding steps in the process. So if I say the finance department approves the credit check, well, that occurs right here in this process and right here in the narrative, right? So what we're trying to do, again, is establish a very strong visual correlation between the narrative, which originates the process diagram, and the steps in the diagram that correspond to that, and showing these lists of information here, which makes it clear the unique nature of Raven, the powerful natural language processing that's being done in order to generate this diagram automatically for you. So, and so that's really just a quick example of that. If I clear out the search criteria, there are other examples we can show, but let me just clear this out for you, and maybe I'll just do something quickly from scratch while we have a few minutes. The way this works is you're going to start to describe the narrative in a form, in an active voice form, that you can get some guidance on by clicking on the help button here in the upper right, where it uses a form of actor, function, object, target in terms of a sentence structure. And Raven is pretty specific. It's going to ask that you please write complete sentences. It's going to ask that you please use an active voice in describing the process, and use articles, does and ands and as in front of the different actors that you reference and the object names and so forth. It's not an absolute requirement, but it sometimes works better if you do, because guess what? English is a notoriously ambiguous language. And so what we've done is work real hard to make sure that Raven can understand what it is you're saying, but there are some things that you can do to make the output and the outcome from the natural language narrative produce the best possible end result. So you can use this as a point of reference, but let's just start something from scratch here and say, well, let's start the process, right? And you can use the phrase start process or end process anywhere in your narrative, which directs the language engine to insert start and end nodes into the diagram when that's produced. So if I do a simple, expense reimbursement process here that starts with, the employee prepares the expense report, and if that was the end of it, right, I could do this, right? I could say, well, not a very big process, but it is a process, right? And I could just continue, right? The employee forwards the expense report to the manager. The manager reviews the expense report, right? So now I've introduced a second actor into the process. You can see that here, right, where I've got an employee actor, a manager actor, and an expense report as an object that's being referenced, right? And so this is how it continues, right? Now this is a natural language engine, right? So there's different ways of expressing the same part of the process. So instead of doing this in 2 sentences, I could even do something like this, right? The employee forwards the expense report to the manager, right, who then reviews it, right? That's pretty natural, right? And so you get the same end result from that type of expression or use of the English language, but I just want to make sure it's clear to you that it's indeed possible with Raven to express yourself in that manner. So if I continue to do this, right, I could say, well, if the manager approves the expense report, then he forwards it to accounting, right? And now I've introduced a third actor in the process, the accounting department. Right? Then he forwards it to accounting. I guess I didn't. There we go. Let me take this out of the way so you can see and make the diagram fit. Now, the other thing that it did at this point is that this little error light lit up here in the toolbar, saying that there's some process errors I've just introduced into this simple process. And in this particular case, I entered a conditional statement if the manager approves the expense report, which has a true path or a yes path emanating from the decision step, but it doesn't have a false path. Right? So the way I need to correct that is to say, well, it might end there, but there's an otherwise clause that's required here. Otherwise, the manager, I'm typing, returns the expense report to the employee. Right? And so now you've got that error clears itself, and you have a complete process from start to finish. And you can do other things like you can insert labels in there if you want to loop back and say, well, if I label this prepare, and I could put here go to the prepare label, which basically is telling me to kind of loop back in this structure and begin again, right? So this is just a quick example of how you can use Raven to describe a process in writing and then generate the diagram automatically from that text. So, and again, there's a number of error detections that are done. Obviously it just showed you that incomplete conditional statement, but there's other things like ambiguous statements, missing steps, flow breaks. Those kinds of things are detected automatically in your text so that you can correct them in the diagram and again find those issues earlier in the cycle than not. Let me take a pause here and say there's a question about how is the application system identified? Does Ravencloud take a process flow and translate it into a process document in common terms? I think those questions are good ones. There's a notion that we have. Raven doesn't specifically identify an application or a system actor on its own, right? And all that I've shown you here is done without the aid of a business glossary, which is an optional service and one that we'll be introducing into Ravencloud in the coming months. Our Raven Professional product actually has a business glossary built into it, so you can identify systems of record by name and make sure that you're consistently referencing them in your process definitions. But if I said, the employee prepares the expense report and sends it to the dog, it's not going to be able to tell the difference between a dog and a manager, right? Without the aid of a glossary, where you go to the next level and say this actor is a person that exists inside the enterprise or exists outside the enterprise. Those are all glossary-based definitions that Raven can leverage if a glossary exists. It doesn't need it to exist, but it can leverage one, and obviously works to reinforce a shared vocabulary to the extent that you leverage a glossary. And we think that's certainly a best practice. And the other question has to do about take the process flow and translate it into process document in common terms. I'm not sure what that question, how to answer that question. Currently, in our current products, we have the ability to publish specification documents from Raven Professional. A similar kind of capability is intended for Raven Cloud, so you'll be able to define these process models, associate requirements to steps in the flow, and then publish all the above to a document with or without the aid of a glossary. So in general, the roadmap says that we'll be doing these kinds of things, Joe. And if you have any follow-up questions, certainly feel free to reach out to me directly via email. Okay, so let's stop this unique stuff, and let me just go ahead and get into the Visio part of this. So let's say that I wanted to use this customer support process as an example. You saw how the modeling part works. Let me tuck this out of the way again, maximize this. There is also going to be an ability to describe not only the narrative of the process, but provide some descriptive attributes for this. This is part of the subscription service that will be available next month. And I'd hope to have, I could show you the QA system this morning in the demonstration, but it's not alive right now, so I can't show that. But this gives you a sense of how that's going to look, where you'll have an ability to create these processes, to find some descriptive attributes for you to store these things away and reference them, and that's just a stepping stone on the road to a complete process repository where you can not only define these things in the cloud, but share and reference them going forward, and support light versioning, all those kinds of things that they're used to doing. But for now, this is kind of what the capabilities are looking like. So to get into the export part of this thing, what we do provide for everyone, right, is the ability to take the diagram that you see, right, and just so you guys know my email address. I can say I want to take this diagram away as a JPEG image of the diagram I see. All right, so I'm going to do that here, put it on my desktop, give it a name called webinar, and save it. All right, so and if I go out to my desktop and I find this webinar image that I created, then that's what you see. So for every Ravencloud account holder, you'll have an ability to generate a JPEG image of the diagram. In this case, it shows a a little watermark, so it's still in beta, but in general, it's a full fidelity representation of what you saw displayed in the cloud. So that's the default output. Let me go back to Raven Cloud now, and some other things that I didn't bother to show you. I don't know why I didn't, but things like I want to change the orientation from horizontal to vertical, right? And all those kinds of things. Show the diagram full screen, all those kinds. So those are just inherent capabilities of Raven Cloud. No big surprise there, but I was remiss not to show you those capabilities. Now, some other output options that are going to be available to subscribers. It's available right now in beta, so you could play with them if you want to. One of which is export the diagram in XBDL format. I'm not going to go ahead and show this right now, but there's a number of XML process representations, if you will, that are considered industry standards. XMI metadata interchange, oftentimes used in the system modeling arena. And then XBDL 2.0 and 2.1, we're supporting both of those now in the Raven Cloud beta because some business process vendors only support the 2.0 standard. I think the latest is 2.2 on the road to 3.0 XBDL. So these are all evolving industry standards. XBDL is the most prominent of those. Most major BPM vendors support that. So if you wanted to use Raven as an onboarding mechanism for processes like you see here, then you could use the XBDL export from Raven Cloud and then pull that in to your process modeling platform of choice. So that's what that's for. But today the focus, of course, is Visio, right? So let's focus on that. Download diagram as Visio. You have a couple options here. One is to, I like the color styling that I see, so just go ahead and give me in that form, or strip your color styling out of it because I want to use native Visio styling. There's also information like shape information, step information that we could send along to Visio. So I'll select that option. And we have the ability to support Visio 2007 and Visio 2010. There's some fundamental differences in the underlying file representations of those versions of Visio. But let's just use the Visio 2010 for now. Go ahead and this, of course, you won't have to do this when you're a subscriber. This is just in the open beta period. So I'm going to go ahead and call this webinar as well. In this case, it'll be a webinar for Visio diagram. Now it's output there. I'll find that Visio diagram on my desktop. There it is. I'll double click on it. And now what you'll see is that same diagram rendered in Microsoft Visio as you see here. All right. So and so it's pretty much a full fidelity, a faithful representation of the diagram that originated there. You'll see some subtle differences in how the steps are laid out. The connectivity algorithms are slightly different. We just allow Visio to do its job in terms of laying out or orchestrating the connection of these steps in the diagram. But you do see the same type of swim lanes and the same gradient fills that you saw in the cloud. And as I told you, in addition to the diagram itself, I can turn on the shape data window here, and you can see the information that was passed along at the diagram level. Here at the process model level, including the process narrative, the number of sentences in that narrative, the number of steps in the flow, who are the actors, what are the objects and terms, and even at the step level, you can see that some intelligence has been passed in from Raven Cloud into Visio because Visio is a pretty powerful visual data handling environment, right? And so what our vision roadmap for this is you're going to get more and more intelligence passed in, which allows you to leverage that intelligence to a greater extent wherever you just intend to take this particular process model. So let me close this shape data window. And again, because this is now native Visio, all right, that's abiding by the cross-functional flowchart stencil that is packaged with Visio, now I can do things like, show the title bar or hide the title bar, right? Or show the separator, meaning the separator line to show different phases in the process or not, right? And so forth. I can do things like change the obviously the connectivity of these steps, right? And just let Visio deal with that, right? However you want it to do it, right? It's really totally up to you. I can undo that. Obviously, there's ability to move things around as you see fit. Again, letting Visio kind of dealing with the layout side of that thing. There's also an ability to change the design and apply Visio specific styles. Not that these are very attractive or as attractive as what we prepare by default, but I just want to give you a sense that this now behaves like a native Visio diagram, right? And can leverage all the powerful diagramming features of Visio using Raven Cloud or Raven specifically as a point of origin, as a basis for getting this diagram created without having to draw it from scratch. Now, there are other things that you can do. For example, you can change the connectors styles from, right angles to curved to straight lines. Not that you'd want to do that, but you could. Right, or back to the way they were. Again, it's all going to abide by whatever the Visio standard is supporting. And of course, you can do things like even move these swim lanes around, right? So, and again, let Visio do the redrawing part of it. So there's intelligence here. There's an ability to resize the swim lanes, right? All the things that you would expect to do as a Visio-based product. I see another question coming up, so let me just kind of answer those questions here. What is a native format for Ravenflow? The native format, it's stored internally as an XML representation, Ray. And again, you can take it away as Visio. You can take it away as a JPEG image. But when you store the diagram away, then it's going to be, it's not something that you can externalize directly as a file format. We intend to support that going forward so that you could just say, share this from Ray to Dave, right? And so instead of just being sharing the narrative text, you could actually share the XML representation, which would allow me to just take it in directly. So that's part of the roadmap, but right now that's not exposed to you. If not sure if you covered this already, when do you export in other formats like PowerPoint or Mac? Does it intelligently do page breaks? No, it doesn't do. It'll abide by page breaks of those native applications. Page support, more intelligent printing capability from Raven Cloud is something that we're working on. So, for example, you'll be able to, continue to the next page or introduce a new page, similar to the way you do that in Visio today, right? Which is, click on the little tab below there and say, insert a new page. We're going to do the same type of thing in Raven Cloud so that you could continue the narrative from one page to the next, primarily driven for preserving process legibility, right? So you can make sure that the resulting diagram isn't too hard to read when it's committed to paper or committed to a PowerPoint slide or what have you. And you should also know from a roadmap perspective, we're also going to do not just Raven Cloud to Visio as I've just demonstrated, but also have a Visio plugin directly. So in other words, you'll be able to author the narrative inside Visio and then have the diagram appear right next to that narrative. Or we're also going to have, as part of our Raven for Office suite early next year, a PowerPoint add-in so that you'll be able to, PowerPoint is your go-to tool. And for 20% or more of you that's the case, then you can go ahead and use PowerPoint author the narrative inside PowerPoint and have the diagram basically rendered on a collection of slides automatically. Right, so that's kind of where we're going with that. Another question here. Thanks for covering. Okay, no problem. So that wasn't a question. That was praise. I like praise, so just keep that coming. All right. So this is fundamentally what the Raven Cloud to Visio capability is like. And again, I think it's a great way of onboarding process models and getting them in Visio format if that's your corporate standard. Because depending on the scope of the project, right, you may be a subject matter expert in a particular area, but maybe you don't have Visio, or maybe you don't like to use it, or maybe you're just not trained on using it well. So, but you have colleagues that do and that can and will leverage this. So if I can expand the pool of people that can contribute their process knowledge and expertise using Raven Cloud as an on-ramp, if you will, then you end up producing more artifacts faster that can be confirmed with stakeholders sooner in the life cycle than not, which allows you to detect issues, flow breaks or errors or sources for flawed requirements earlier, which basically makes the whole life cycle run more effective and efficient, overall. So that's that. Let me go back to the presentation, and we'll just wrap this up really quickly. In terms of a value proposition for this, we obviously have been, engaged in the market for a long time, both for business process as well as for requirements here at Ravenflow. But in some of the industry analysts, the luminaries of the business process market, like Nathaniel Palmer of BPM.com or Sandy Kelmsley, they look at this as a way of getting more people involved, right, sooner rather than later, and not forcing them to become Visio experts or drawing experts in order as a price for entry, right? So, so that if we can increase the pool of people or open more doors for more people to contribute, that means that you can get better requirements done, get better process models created that confirm those requirements, and help more people contribute value to the project overall, which helps everything run more efficiently and effectively, as I said before. So that's all goodness. Now, final couple things for you before we run out of time. We have a couple of roadmap items I was hoping to get your feedback on. BPMN, Business Process Modeling Notation, a key industry standard. We're working on providing between now and year end an ability to generate a diagram like this, which is more consistent with the BPM standard in terms of how the steps are laid out and so forth. So we've got that on the roadmap. A lot of users aren't so interested in BPMN, but certainly are interested in even higher fidelity diagrams, domain-specific diagrams that really speak to the audiences that you're engaging. And so with the aid of a glossary that we'll be introducing late this year, you'll be able to associate icons to the terms that you're using in the narrative, and then they'll have those icons appear as in the steps themselves, which gives you an ability to produce a diagram like this, what I call a high fidelity or business friendly diagram, which again brings more people in, engages more people, allows hopefully for better communication as you see through that. The power of visualization, if you will. Glossary, we talked a little bit about this in terms of responding to your questions. We do think this is a critical foundation element where the terms that you're using in the narrative are terms that should be common across your company. So you're using a shared vocabulary which helps you communicate with more consistency and clarity of intent. And so what you'll see is an ability to leverage that glossary in cloud or Office or next generation products as a separate capability that you can turn on or turn off at your discretion, populate it with the terminology of your business so that when you reference those terms mean something, right? They mean something to you and they mean something to all the stakeholders who happens to review that process or even participate in that process. So that's a clear item. Requirements collection. Many of the people that attend these types of webinars do so because of our heritage in providing requirement solutions to the market. So what you'll see is an ability to not only visualize the process, but then go in either at the diagram level or the step level and associate lists of requirements to those steps or to those diagrams, as shown conceptually here. And what that allows you to do, right, is say, well, here's the process as it is, and here's how I want it to be, and here are the requirements for effecting that transformation, right? And so not all requirements can be implicitly derived from just looking at the diagram. You need to perhaps describe the functional parameters of a particular activity or the non-functional or system performance characteristics of some other point in the process. So these are all things that you'll be able to do through the requirements collection capability. And then finally, a privately hosted Raven Cloud is something that people have been asking us for. We love Raven Cloud. We want to be able to leverage it in our company, but we can't put our process artifacts in a public cloud, so can we host it privately on our infrastructure? And so what I'd ask you to do then is quickly respond to this final poll question, which is, which of these enhancements do you see as most you'd like to see most, which is this. I'll launch it. 2 more minutes. Thank you for hanging in with me. Just give us a quick feedback of which of these enhancements you think would be most valuable to you in your role as a business analyst or a process analyst or anywhere in between. Getting up to our 60%, 70% threshold. And so hold on one more second. Okay, so let me close the poll, share the results. So 20% of you are looking for the BPMN style diagram, about the same or more are interested in something even higher fidelity. 60% like the business glossary idea. 73% want the ability to associate requirements to the process models that are created, and 27% could really use a privately hosted version of that. Okay, so thanks for that, and let's just close it up here. Learn more by going to ravencloud.com. Try it for yourself. It's going to be available in public beta here. There'll be a free account capability next month as well, but everything's turned on right now. Visio and XPDL and everything's available. So certainly for the rest of the month you'll have access to that. So go try it yourself and refer some colleagues to give it a try as well. If there are other, if something else that you'd like to kind of learn, we'll continue to be running these types of Raven Cloud webinars over the next several months, and we'll always be showing the latest and greatest that exists at that point in time. So there's always something new that you'll probably see, especially if I'm doing the demonstration. You can join our email list, participate in the Raven Cloud blog, etc. And so that's all good. And finally, let me just see if there's any remaining questions. Can you repeat the website where we could try out the product? Just go to ravencloud.com, www.ravencloud.com, and that'll take you right there. And any integration with other tools, Doors, not yet, though. Obviously, collecting requirements, associating requirements to steps in the process, all of that tied together, and then allowing you to take that as an Excel spreadsheet or ultimately as a set of work items or requirements artifacts that you could import into the likes of the IBM Rational Doors platform. That's absolutely on the roadmap, David. We do that today with our current product, Raven Professional to Doors, Raven Professional to RecPro, Raven Professional to Microsoft Visual Studio Team System, and to HP Quality Center. So we have a history of doing these types of integrations, but we haven't yet done it for Raven Cloud because that's the first member of the new generation product line, and it's just going to take us a few more months to get there. So let me wrap it up there. Appreciate all your time and attention today. Thanks for coming. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me via email. If you'd like a copy of the presentation, send me the email as well. And hopefully this is valuable to you today. any questions, you can also post them out on our blog. Thanks again, and we hope to see you all again soon. So bye for now, and have a great rest of the week.